So back in mid-2020 I posted my Banjo-Kazooie retrospective, and this video was a follow-up to it after the first game was released on the NSO's expansion pack. I would recommend watching the previous video before this one as it follows on from it. Now, at the end of that video, I said a few things.
Personally, I wasn't too sure what we may have gotten for new content, but one thing I was really sure about was that Microsoft might be inclined to allow ports of the Xbox versions of both Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie to the Switch.
So, if you want to play Banjo-Kazooie today, you can do so on Xbox.
Well, that didn't happen. Now, don't get me wrong. If suddenly a new Banjo game was announced, I will be excited. I'll be interested in what's going on and who made or is making it.
Now, neither of those things has actually happened, but putting Banjo-Kazooie on the NSO is a little bit of both, and I decided to talk about it. I'm going to start off by being a tad blunt. The reason I subscribed to the expansion pack had little to do with Banjo-Kazooie actually coming, but rather the announcement of the Booster Course Pass for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This speaks more about the quality of the expansion pack, since on release the pack's quality was so low that my favourite game of all time couldn't convince me to subscribe. I'm going to try to not turn this into a commentary on the expansion pack, but some parts will still be addressed as I discuss Banjo-Kazooie's presence on the Switch. The presence of this game officially available on a Nintendo console for the first time in 24 years was a bit of a shocker when it was announced to be coming in the Nintendo Direct for September 2021. And in hindsight, it really felt like a natural progression after Banjo and Kazooie came to Smash. It's a sensible move to place the character's game on the console of the Smash game in some capacity, and Nintendo have done this in the past with previous characters. A number of my general thoughts on Banjo-Kazooie on Switch relate largely with the quality of the Nintendo 64 games on NSO, one main thing being the button mapping. The defaults are non-adjustable, and I see this as Nintendo's attempt to get consumers to shell out money for the Nintendo 64 Pro Controller. For the Switch Pro Controller, the defaults leave A and B the same, while X is down C and Y is left C, and holding ZR to appropriate the 4 face buttons to the C buttons in the proper locations, as well the right stick is mapped to the C buttons too. On one level, it might seem really intuitive for a game like Banjo-Kazooie because the 4Z plus C actions, eggs, talent shots, Wonder Wing, you're already pressing ZL to crouch Banjo, so it's a matter of holding the 2 triggers, but there's another problem that generates from this. The setup assigns C left to the Y button, so you don't actually need the added step of pressing ZR to do talent shot. And this might also seem intuitive because talent shot is the one that's used the most. But the issue is that this resulted in me developing a habit of going into talent shot without the ZR button, and so when I want to do others, particularly the Wonder Wing, I tend to not press ZR due to the habit of not doing it for talent shot. As well, the inverse occasionally happened where I was holding down ZR for a C button action, but then instead the camera moved. It sounds like a small thing, but it happens so much. I don't know if inexperienced players are going to do that, but I can see it happening since talent shot doesn't necessarily necessitate it. Another weird one is that A and B align to each other on both controllers rather than the A button aligning to B on the Switch and B on Nintendo 64 aligning to Y on the Switch, respectively, for the sake of physical orientation. Though they'll have to rethink the C button placements before hitting ZR. Graphically, the game is as good as you would expect if you expected 720p 4x3 as the rest of the Nintendo 64 games on NSO are. It's a port of the Nintendo 64 version, up-resed and a tad sharper in the same vein as the rest of the Nintendo 64 games, and much like them it had a few odd graphical bugs, one of them being in Gobi's Valley. A number of structures, including Jinxie, have this darker appearance compared to the sand. This was not seen at all on the Nintendo 64 version, or the Xbox Live Arcade version. A second graphical glitch came in when diving underwater. The blue filter doesn't cover the whole screen, leaving the far right hand and far bottom edges without it. These have no effect on gameplay whatsoever, but they're there and visible. I didn't notice any other graphical issues as well. I also noticed no input lag, but I would consider myself in the most players won't notice camp, so take my word with a grain of salt. It's better to ask someone who's done more research. Overall, I enjoyed playing Banjo-Kazooie on NSO, and I love that it's here. I think this does open the door for Banjo-Tooie to come as well. There are rumours of the possibility of seeing GoldenEye on the Switch, but my biggest hope would be Diddy Kong Racing. That game has been in legal limbo for 20 years now, because even if Microsoft owns Banjo-Kazooie, at least someone owns it. No one fully owns Diddy Kong Racing, but with Nintendo and Microsoft being really buddy-buddy right now, it's definitely a possibility. The only thing holding this back is having Conker in the game, who went on a frenzy after Diddy Kong Racing came out in another game that's probably not even going to come out on the NSO. I never want to get too optimistic about Banjo's future because of history, and it would really bum me out if I got super hopeful and nothing ever happened again, but it's hard to deny that things are looking up for the games and the franchise. I'm Hat Warren Gamer, and this has been a follow-up on the Banjo-Kazooie Retrospective.